Marrying the Dauphin of France at an early age, the Austrian archduchess becomes a queen and enjoys a seemingly lavish lifestyle, which later leads to unforeseen challenges. To foster stronger ties between Austria and France, Empress Maria Theresa of Vienna arranges for her youngest daughter, Antoine, to marry Louis Auguste, the future heir to the French throne. Before the naive archduchess departs the country, her mother briefs her on the distinctive and attentive nature of the French court. She emphasizes the importance of heeding Ambassador Mercy's counsel at all times. Antoine boards the carriage with her friends and her dog, Mops. During the journey, she examines a photograph of her fiancé, filled with anticipation and excitement about the upcoming meeting. After days of travel, Antoine finally reaches the border and meets Comtesse de Noailles, her maid of honor. In preparation for the handover ceremony, the noblewoman instructs her to bid farewell to her Austrian roots, which include her friends and beloved dog. Subsequently, the archduchess rids her Austrian clothing and changes into a French dress with the assistance of the ladies. Along with this transformation, she adopts the name Marie Antoinette. After the handover ceremony, she embarks on the journey and finally meets King Louis XV and her fiancé, Louis Auguste. Shortly after being taken to the Palace of Versailles, Marie Antoinette marries the Dauphin of France, marking her as the Dauphin. A grand ball unfolds post-ceremony, with the newlyweds gracefully dancing in the center, amusing the crowd. The king congratulates the couple, hoping they will produce an heir to the French throne as soon as possible. Following the fireworks display, Louis Auguste and his wife spend their first night as a married pair, receiving the priest's blessing. Regrettably, nothing happened between the couple, leading to disappointment for the king the following morning. Meanwhile, Marie Antoinette wakes to find the Comtesse de Noailles and several noblewomen before her bed. The maid of honor clarifies that there's a morning dressing ceremony and informs the Dauphine that she will be dressed by her sister-in-law, Comtesse de Provence. Realizing she can no longer act independently, Marie Antoinette remarks on its absurdity. In response, Comtesse de Noailles points out that such customs are essential within the palace. Following this, the couple is served breakfast. While dining, the Dauphine inquires about her husband's hobby of making keys, to which he responds with a dry tone. During the mass, Marie Antoinette laughs upon observing a noblewoman sleeping behind them. Witnessing this, Comtesse de Noailles gently reminds her to maintain proper behavior. On that evening, the Dauphine dines with the aristocrats. Some speak negatively about her, commenting that she is too young and should return to Austria. Meanwhile, nearby, the king shares laughter with his courtesan, Madame du Barry, who openly exhibits her impolite behavior in front of everyone. After dinner, Marie Antoinette sleeps without Louis Auguste. The following night, her husband returns from a hunt. Despite the Dauphine's attempts to share a romantic moment with him, he rejects her advances, stating that he's exhausted. While at a picnic the next day, Marie Antoinette distributes cold meat to the hunters out of concern. However, Ambassador Mercy reprimands her, highlighting that such behavior is not fitting for a future Queen of France. In her defense, the royal woman explains that she's just trying to be kind to her spouse's hunting party. Later, inside the palace, Ambassador Mercy advises the Dauphine to abstain from riding, citing concerns about the potential miscarriage based on the Austrian Empress's letter. However, Marie Antoinette counters, asserting that she is not pregnant, and places blame on Louis Auguste, who is not interested in sleeping with her. In response, Ambassador Mercy emphasizes the Dauphine's obligation to bear a child, implying that she must try to allure her husband. Marie Antoinette then assures him that she will do her best to avoid disappointing everyone, particularly her mother. Before Mercy departs, he leaves a letter from Maria Theresa. As the Dauphine reads her mother's message, she contemplates a strategy to bring out her husband's interest in intimacy. That evening, she adorns a thin nightgown and informs Louis Auguste that she feels cold. However, the disinterested spouse simply suggests getting a blanket and wishes her a good night's sleep. The following morning, Marie Antoinette sticks to her routine as a royal woman, dressing up, having breakfast, and attending mass. Later in the day, she strolls around the palace, and Madame du Barry gazes at her with a rude look, intentionally bumping into her. Upon learning that her daughter is still not pregnant, Maria Theresa becomes anxious, contemplating that the Dauphine's sister-in-law, Comtesse de Provence, might have better chances of bearing the heir to the throne. In her letter, the Austrian Empress also counsels the Dauphine to form a friendship with Madame du Barry, as the courtesan holds favor with the king. Marie Antoinette contemplates visiting Madame du Barry as per her mother's request. However, when she shares this intention with the court ladies, they perceive the promiscuous woman as dreadful, manipulative, and disrespectful. Later that day, Madame du Barry, adorned in splendid attire, enters the palace, sparking gossip among the noblewomen. As the courtesan approaches them, Marie Antoinette intentionally ignores her, redirecting redirecting her focus to Madame Victoire and complimenting her Parisian shoes. Ambassador Mercy visits the Dauphine the next morning, informing her that Madame du Barry wishes to gift her some diamonds. However, the royal woman declines, stating she already possesses sufficient gemstones. Upon hearing Marie Antoinette's refusal, Mercy warns her that rejecting the king's courtesan is unwise, as it may be construed as criticism of the king's behavior and preferences. Despite the ambassador's advice to initiate contact with Madame du Barry, the Dauphine dismisses the idea, pointing out that she has nothing to say to someone who came from a brothel and earned her title through unconventional means. Acknowledging the potential threat to her royal union with Louis Auguste, Mercy points out that Madame du Barry has been complaining about her. Realizing the implications of her disobedience, Marie Antoinette decides to comply with the order and finally addresses Madame du Barry the following day, exchanging a few words with her. That evening, the couple still has no development in producing an heir. Louis Auguste reads a book about keys while his wife eats in bed. One morning, Ambassador Mercy brings news to Marie Antoinette about the conflict in Poland. The Russians and Austrians have taken a part of their land, causing distress as Poland is an ally of France. Consequently, Maria Theresa hopes that her daughter can help ease the crisis. However, the Dauphine becomes perplexed, questioning whether she should align with her homeland or France. In response, Mercy suggests that she find a way to support both countries somehow. Feeling the weight of her mother's expectations, Marie Antoinette confides in her husband the next day before his hunting expedition to Saint-Cloud. She expresses the fear of potential humiliation at the French court if her sister-in-law were to become pregnant before her. Louis Auguste reassures her, pledging to handle everything upon his return. Meanwhile, King Louis XV reassures Ambassador Mercy of his commitment to maintaining France's alliance with Austria. However, upon discovering that Marie Antoinette and her husband are still not pregnant, he becomes concerned and decides to have the couple examined by a doctor. Dr. Lasson pays a visit, inquiring with Louis Auguste about the responsiveness of his body. Hesitatingly, the Dauphin nods while his wife discreetly chuckles beside him. While watching a performance at the Royal Theatre that night, Marie Antoinette meets Yolande, the Duchesse de Polignac, who shares a similar bubbly personality. Eventually, they become good friends. After the play, Marie Antoinette expresses her appreciation for the show by applauding, only to realize that she's the only one doing so. Her friend, Princess de Lamballe, explains that applause is not allowed in court performances. Undeterred, Marie Antoinette insists that the play was terrific, convincing everyone to join her in applause. This simple action captivates Louis Auguste, who begins to appreciate his wife. The following day, the Dauphine receives a letter from her mother, revealing that her sister, Maria Carolina, is expecting her first child in June, and her brother, Ferdinand, has recently married. Despite the good news, the Empress expresses disappointment with her daughter for not yet conceiving a child with Louis Auguste. She emphasizes that everything depends on the wife, and advises Marie Antoinette to use her charm and patience to captivate her husband. The Empress underscores that producing an heir is crucial for securing her daughter's place in the palace. Surprisingly, that night, Louis Auguste attempts to kiss his wife, but hesitates, prompting him to apologize. Marie Antoinette reassures him that it's okay, and the couple proceeds to sleep. The following morning, Comtesse de Noailles delivers the news that the Dauphine's sister-in-law, Comtesse de Provence, is about to give birth to a baby boy destined to become the Prince of Bourbon. Marie Antoinette congratulates the couple but finds herself growing frustrated with the news. Seeking solace, she retreats to her room to shed some tears. To deal with her complex emotions, the royal woman starts spending more time with her friends and grows obsessed with shoes, sweets, drinking, and betting. Additionally, she hires Monsieur Léonard to style her hair. One day, the Dauphine and her friends decide to attend the masked ball in Paris, where they unexpectedly find Louis Auguste among the guests. Later, Marie Antoinette casts a flirtatious gaze at Axel von Fersen, a handsome count from the Swedish army. The interested man then approaches her and introduces himself. Upon hearing his name, the Dauphine departs, leading him to reach out and hold her hand. However, she only glances at him and continues to walk away. At 3:30 in the morning, Louis Auguste invites his wife to return to the palace. However, she insists that they stay longer. Regrettably, when the couple returns to Versailles the following day, they discover that the king has contracted smallpox and has limited time to live. Unfortunately, the priest cannot take the king's confession due to his relations with a courtesan. Because of this, he makes the difficult decision to end everything with Madame du Barry. The next day, Louis XV passes away, leading to Louis Auguste's coronation as king and the Dauphine as the queen. Soon after, Marie Antoinette celebrates her 18th birthday with a grand party featuring abundant drinks and betting. When her husband attempts to persuade her to sleep for the night, the queen insists on staying up to watch the sunrise with the aristocrats. The following day, the king hunts while Marie Antoinette battles a hangover. Later in the day, Ambassador Mercy informs her that she has already spent over 50,000 and nothing is left for charitable causes. In response, the queen pledges to request the funds from her husband and hurriedly turns her attention to trying on new wigs. Meanwhile, the king is engrossed in political matters. He consults with his advisor in a room, who suggests supporting the Americans in their revolution to showcase their country's strength to Europe. When Louis XVI inquires about the financial strain, the advisor proposes a slight tax increase to accommodate the expenditure. Without thorough consideration, the king decides to allocate funds to support America. Meanwhile, the queen enthusiastically embraces her brother, Joseph II, the Holy Emperor, who pays a visit. However, it turns out that his purpose is to lecture his sister about her persistent betting habits and choice of friends. Undeterred, Marie Antoinette remains stubborn and does not take her brother's advice. Desperate, the emperor meets with the king at the royal zoo to motivate him to fulfill his marital duty. He draws a comparison, explaining to the king that key-making and love-making share some similarities. Finally, the king overcomes his challenges in the bedroom and initiates a romantic moment with his wife. As a result, the queen gets pregnant and later gives birth to a baby girl named Marie-Thérèse. Despite not having a son, she assures her daughter that she loves her dearly. As Marie Antoinette spends time with the baby, Comtesse de Noailles orders someone to take the infant away. When the queen expresses her desire to feed her daughter, the maid of honor explains that a nurse will attend to the child. Soon, the king presents his wife with a new mansion, the Petit Trianon. Several years later, Marie Antoinette establishes a farm and raises animals with Marie-Thérèse, avoiding her responsibilities as a royal wife. Occasionally, she invites friends to keep her company. Back at the Palace of Versailles, Ambassador Mercy receives a concern from Duchesse de Chartres about not receiving invitations to the mansion. He informs Marie Antoinette of the complaints, and she pledges to rectify the situation by inviting her husband and the aristocrats to the theater for her first performance. The day following the splendid play, the king pays a visit to the queen, extending an invitation for her to join him in the palace, as there will be a ball for the American soldiers. Marie Antoinette arrives in Versailles and meets Axel von Fersen again, making her smile. During dinner, they exchange sweet glances and engage in a lively conversation. This flirtatious interaction is observed by Romont, who deems it inappropriate for a queen to behave in such a manner. Yolande clarifies that her friend enjoys being entertained, so she engages with the soldier. Soon after, Marie Antoinette initiates a clandestine relationship with Axel von Fersen. However, after a few nights, the young count departs from Versailles to fulfill his duties. His departure leaves the queen saddened, and she constantly thinks about him. Simultaneously, with the king's decision to assist America in their revolution, France begins to accumulate debts, and the villagers start facing starvation. Despite this issue, the advisor persuades the king to persist in aiding the Americans to prove their country's strength to Europe. Soon, the townsfolk harbored resentment towards the queen, fueled by a rumor that she callously suggested they'd offer her cake when they pleaded for bread. In conversations with her friends, Marie Antoinette vehemently denies making such a remark, dismissing it as nonsense. However, despite being aware of the villagers' troubles, she remains ignorant and focuses on spending her fortune on luxurious items. Ambassador Mercy later visits the queen, bringing attention to the dire situation of the people. As a response, she instructs him to inform the court jeweler to stop sending diamonds. Shortly afterward, she learns about her mother's passing. Upon receiving the disheartening news, Marie Antoinette writes a letter to her brother, assuring him that France remains Austria's ally despite the tragic demise of the Empress. A year later, the queen finally gives birth to a baby boy, Louis Charles, fulfilling her husband's dream of having an heir. Regrettably, the townspeople persist in harboring animosity towards her, labeling her as the Queen of Debt. Even during a splendid performance, no one joins her in applause inside the theater. Instead, everyone looks at her with judgment, intensifying the isolation and criticism she faces. Soon, Marie Antoinette becomes pregnant again and gives birth to a baby girl, Sophie, who tragically passes away before her first birthday. One day, the king receives news that an angry mob has stormed the Bastille fortress. Consequently, the French court urges the noblemen to evacuate for safety. Despite the danger, the king insists on staying in Versailles, prompting the queen to follow his lead. Tearfully, Marie Antoinette bids farewell to her friends and Ambassador Mercy. The following day, Louis XVI is alerted that a mob of hundreds is heading to the palace to demand flour. Despite advice to leave, the royal couple remains resolute and chooses to stay. That night, they hear a commotion outside the palace. When the queen opens the door, she encounters angry rioters wielding weapons and torches. Bowing before them, she momentarily silences the crowd. However, she soon returns inside to share a lavish feast with her husband. While they eat, the townsfolk threaten them, compelling the couple to flee Versailles with their children. As the royal family transfers to Tuileries, the enraged crowd trashes Marie Antoinette's lavish bedroom in the palace.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.